Most people say that you learn more through loss than you do through victory.
Hmm.
But that's because people aren't taught how to win right. There's something in victory that shows we got the formula right. But we're usually so busy shouting and going out and eating pizza afterwards that
Yeah.
we don't ask the same questions. The same level of lessons are there for us to examine in victory.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Remington Ramsey, and today my guest is Jonathan Sprinkles, a mutual friend, Wayne Solomons, who was on the show recently, connected us. Jonathan, how you doing today?
I'm feeling great, man. Thank you so much for having me.
You better be feeling great with all that running you're doing. I'm looking over your right shoulder with all those medals, and those are not for T-ball. Those are participating in something much bigger. How many medals are over there?
There's 20 of them, 20 half marathons I've run.
Half marathons, and I happen to know they all started after the pandemic.
That's right.
That's
Yeah.
wild. So you got the bug and you got it hard.
Man, I got the bug and the virus and everything else that came along with it, and a whole bunch of receipts. They said running is free. That's the most not free sport I've ever done.
At what point do they start paying you? That's what I want to know. Got to run faster?
I got to be a whole lot faster and get a whole bunch more medals. They pay me when I stop finishing after people who are pushing strollers.
Yeah. Hey, you finished, and that's more than I can say for me at this point. Well, Jonathan is known for speaking. He's spoken at colleges all over. Most recently, he's speaking primarily in entrepreneur circles, business owners, or just adults in general. And his last book, because you've written many, is "Get Off Your Butt," BUT, and make it happen. What's that book about?
So the book is about the big question: what would your life look like if you stopped second guessing yourself? What would you do if you stopped saying, I want to, but I would like to, but I think I could, but because we all have that, don't we? We all have at some point in our lives go through some level of self-doubt, even people who are at the top. And this is the thing that really excites me about talking with you today and your tribe, because a lot of us feel guilty about some of that imposter syndrome that we experience. We work so hard to get there to the top. And then when we get there, we wonder, do I even belong here? So I'm here to break all that down, where it comes from, and more importantly, how to get rid of it so you could be your best self and have that freedom to achieve all your goals and freedom to also give and help the world through living your soul purpose.
You mentioned imposter syndrome. I think that is one of the most fascinating things because I feel like I've experienced it differently than most. For the longest time, I would say I don't really feel like I've ever had that. But then in some scenarios, I'm like, oh, I feel like this might be what imposter syndrome is. What is imposter syndrome and how does it happen? What makes it come on?
Well, the working definition is essentially, I like to break things down just very conversational. It is imposter syndrome is when a high achiever doesn't feel worthy of the thing that they've achieved.
Mm.
Now, it comes around because of comparison. So, great example. So, I break out of one level. I think, okay, so I finally have run my first half marathon. I get the first one way over there. And then I look around, I think, oh, but this person has 10.
Mhm.
And so I guess maybe I shouldn't feel as proud as I was.
Mm.
I finished mine in 3 hours. Somebody else finished theirs in an hour and a half. Maybe I shouldn't feel as good, or I don't have as much reason to be as proud as I was. So imposter syndrome is really all about comparison.
Yeah.
And I always say that success is two parts. Success is partially about what you achieve, and the second part is how you got what you achieved. So,
Yeah.
for example, Remington gets an amazing award, but the truth is somebody like sabotage. They paid for it, right? You're only here because somebody stacked the deck for you. Well, you got the award, but on the inside, you don't feel like you earned it
Yeah.
versus somebody who went out and earned it themselves. And so that's where it ultimately comes from.
So is imposter syndrome true in some cases? I mean, in that scenario, that would be a legitimate reason to have imposter syndrome.
Well, let's say this. Two things can be true at the same time. When uh, I talk with Division I athletes all the time through the NCAA, and one of the biggest things that people don't realize is how much imposter syndrome even athletes go through. This is what I mean. I talk with people who are at the top of their game to help them to get through some of the psychological traps that we set for ourselves. So two things can be true. Yeah. So you always want to do better, but what happens to us as high performers is we are so conditioned to be focused on the next that we fail to give ourselves credit for what we do right now. Here's an example. So let's say you take some of your top performers, right? If you have some of the top people in any market, you ask them, what do you want to become? What do you want to do? What are your goals? Easy, bam, I can tell you that. But if I asked you the opposite question, if I said, tell me what you're most proud of that you've accomplished over the last 90 days or a year, they'd struggle because the people who are the best at achieving oftentimes are the ones who suck at giving ourselves credit.
Mm. I feel like it has to be a good balance of giving yourself credit, though, right? Because then there's that humility. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. There's a humility factor that goes into that sometimes. So if you ask someone, like, we feature realtors on the cover, 12 times a year in 130 markets. So we've talked to a lot of realtors, and asking them what makes them successful, you get two extremes. You got one who gives all the glory to their team and everyone else. They deflect all of that. Which at some point, I feel like, based on what you're saying, could be a little unhealthy if you're not actually admitting, like, hey, I actually did a lot of things to help other people. And then you have the other extreme where they take the ego side, where it's like, I am awesome, I did all this. And then you have everything in between. And so what is a healthy relationship with success, and how you give yourself credit, in your opinion?
Well, that's a great question. And I'll be honest with you, this is one that is up for debate. I think that the majority of the gurus out there are dead wrong. A lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't say anything until someone else says it about you. Or you find, like you said, like I won't say any names, but you find some people who will just say, well, I did this. I did it all myself, and my team was just there to support me. I believe that the majority of people who are out there who say that you should only give credit to others are dead wrong. Listen, I don't know what time it is where you are, whether we're on the same time zone or not, but let's say it's around lunchtime for you right now. If I ask you, R double, that's my name for you, R double, are you hungry? What would your answer be?
In this moment, no.
If I said,
Oh, around lunchtime? I'm sorry. Around
no, I'm
lunchtime?
saying right now,
Oh.
are you hungry?
No.
Yes, you are. Okay, I'm going to ask you again. Are you hungry?
No.
Well, because I said you are, then you are. See, so here's the point. I can't tell you whether you're hungry or not because I'm not inside your body, inside your mind, right?
Yeah.
But if you wait for me to tell you whether you're hungry, then you're asking me to give you permission. And this is why I have such a big problem with people who say, well, don't say it, let other people say it for you. Because you know what you did. You know how you feel. You know the sacrifices that you made. Here's my phrase that I use. This actually goes into chapter 1 in the book. I talk about using mile markers from a race as a metaphor and how important it is for you to do these things so that you can see how far you've come. My word on this is OTS. Own that stuff. It's important for you to own it, because when you own it, that's going to remind your brain why you're working so hard. You've got to be willing to say, yes, I'm great at what I do because I work hard at becoming great. I worked at this. I deserve to feel proud. I deserve to feel accomplished. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to say, yes, I'm great because of all the things that I've accomplished. Now, the difference between arrogance and entitlement is effort. If you say, well, I'm great because I'm here, because I got nice hair, well, that's entitlement. But when you are humble enough to appreciate the journey, you say, yes, I'm great. And I've earned the right to say that I'm great. There's a psychological reason for that because your beliefs and your behaviors in time will align. If you say, I'm okay, I'm doing all right. Yeah, I'm, I'm doing just okay, or I've got a long way to go. Your brain will continue to search for things that are aligned with that belief. But if you say, I'm number one, if you say, I'm the best because I work to be the best, then your
Yeah.
brain will search out opportunities to make that true.
Well, what you're saying is interesting. I feel like it's a difference between I'm a Colts fan, here in Indy, and we had Peyton Manning for years, and he was a masterful interview after games, and he would always deflect and he would give the praise to his team. Like you always hear, like the top quarterbacks, they give the praise to their team and they take the blame on themselves. But he would do it in a way that was actually believable, and he would not shy away from praise, but he would ultimately take the praise, say thank you, but ultimately it's the guys. Then we got a quarterback named Andrew Luck, who most of you guys have heard, who, in my opinion, was such a bad interview because it was so not believable what he was saying. Like people would give him the praise and be like, "Oh no!" Like every single time, like just it was such a boring interview because it was like a robot. You knew exactly what he was going to say. It was fake humility. I felt like. And I'm gonna get a lot of flack for Indy fans who like love it. And by the way, I love the way Andrew Luck played, and I like him as a person. I just feel like his interview skills were just garbage because I just never believed what he was saying. It was just like a canned response. This is what they told me to say so that my team loves me. And so I wonder how often, if you're experiencing success and you're not, it's not that you need to gloat about it, but if you have that fake interview humility, how much does that play into you actually eventually feeling like maybe you don't deserve it because you've told yourself so many times you haven't actually done anything well? Is there something to be said for that?
So you give a great example with Peyton Manning. I'm a big Peyton Manning fan as well, just for a lot of reasons because of the brand that he's created even after his career. He and his brother, the entire Manning family, have done a great job, and enough respect to them.
Yeah.
So here's what we know to be true. Um, there's the narrative and then there's the truth. The media will always get the narrative. The media will always get, hey, it's really about them. I'm going to put it on my team. That's smart leadership because that way you take the shine and you turn it on other people. And that way you build up and cultivate a sense of team culture where everyone has a sense of ownership. That's smart. But let me
Yeah.
ask you a question. As soon as that light goes off and he's in the locker room, who do you think is the one who's going to be asked to deliver the speech on
Mhm.
Monday morning when it's time to get in the locker room and strap up again and get refocused for the next game? Who do you think is going to be the one who's
Yeah.
responsible for rallying the team? He knows that's on him. It's not
Yeah.
about them. It's on him as the leader and the most important person in the team. So yes, the media will always get that. There is a time to give the credit to others, but when it's time to lead your group, that's on the leader.
Mm. You've spoken in a lot of locker rooms over the years. Have you ever spoken after a loss?
So after not in a locker room directly after a loss, the majority of my work would happen with the executives at this point with
Mm.
teams or on higher levels with hospital systems or with
What would you say to the executives of the teams? What was your message to them? Like
so
how to create motivation in their players or what?
So ironically, I'm coming to Indy this weekend to talk to the NCAA Basketball Coaches Association. So
Nice.
I'll be breathing the same air as you. And here's what I say about wins and losses. Look, we all know that wins and losses, they happen in business and in life. Sometimes you get the deal. Sometimes the deal falls through. Sometimes it's your fault. Sometimes it's like, what the heck? What just happened? Here's what I say. This is my thought on wins and losses as a competitor, as a leader, and as a coach of performers. Most people say that you learn more through loss than you do through victory.
Mhm.
But that's because people aren't taught how to win right. There's
Mhm.
something in victory that shows we got the formula right. But we're usually so busy shouting and going out and eating pizza afterwards that
Yeah.
we don't ask the same questions. The same level of lessons are there for us to examine in victory. We just
Yeah.
don't ask ourselves and scrutinize everything. When we lose, we're like, holy crap. Okay, what I eat for breakfast? How did I tie up my shoes? What did I do wrong? And so we ask ourselves questions with a different level of scrutiny that we do in a victory. So when you win, you need to ask yourself, what did I just do? Why did that just happen? Right?
Mm.
You have to learn how to ask yourself the same 3, 4 questions in victory and in defeat. And you can understand that in loss, there's something that we need to get rid of. But in a victory, there's something that we need to replicate
Yeah. Well, let's talk about football. Are you a football fan?
all day.
Who's your team?
I like football. So I
I get that.
honestly, I like to see a close game. There
Your
are certain,
fantasy team is your number one in your heart, followed by other teams. I get that.
pretty much. I live in Houston, so I happen to be a fan of the Houston Texans.
What do you think about Stroud, man? That guy's got some good things to say and do on the field.
He's been well trained. I like what he's about.
Yeah, I'm a fan. So I think about, well, you were talking about how to win, so when people say I learn more from my losses than my wins, you actually feel like they're just not learning enough from their wins, and that's how they can if they learn how to duplicate that, they'd be, in a much better place. I think about Philly. I think about the Eagles and the difference between the Eagles and KC, where, KC's able to duplicate it over. And now there's going to be something said for how good your quarterback plays and all that. But something happened to Philly this last year to where they had virtually the same team, if not a better one, and then just spiraled out of control down and you would say, hey, why could they not figure out how to duplicate from the winning process from the year before, or even the Super Bowl win they had a couple of years ago? Is there anything there? Like, how do you acknowledge that?
Yeah. So from an unconscious level, if you say things like, well, I learn more from my losses than I do from my wins, let's just pull that forward into your question. What that does is it trains your unconscious mind to look positively on your losses.
Yeah.
And
So it's almost like,
them.
man, I can't wait to lose again so I can learn so much.
Exactly. And so you create a losing mentality where there's an old expression where the energy goes, it expands, right? And so if you put more energy behind a loss than you do your wins, then you're going to unconsciously become addicted to that feeling that you get from losing. And people say, oh, come on now, I don't want that. I didn't say that you wanted it.
Yeah.
It's something that we start to become addicted to. It's because it's what we know, even if it's not what we want. So chapter 4 of the book, I talk about that. I talk about how to live without limits. We limit ourselves and we place a lot of subconscious barriers. There was a producer who I was working with one time, not a music producer, I'm talking about a real estate producer person. He had heavy production. He had it in his mind. Hey, I'm going to do this percent of revenue of GCI this year. And he got there early, couldn't produce anything else because that's what he had established in his mind as his boundary. So there's ways for us to break free from that, but you've got to be able to talk over that and be able to put the right energy on the things that are going to help you to move forward. Once I got him to think differently, then he was able to get unstuck and then continue to produce. And he had a record-setting year.
Man, I resonate with that. I look at my dreams list, and I've talked about this before on the show, but I carry around a dreams list that I started in 2009. And some of the dreams on there were like a 10-year goal almost. And so I hit it, and then I'm like, what? Why did I say 10 years? Like, this needed to be a 50-year goal. Mm-hmm. And so is there something to be said for knowing how to properly set your goals from the very start so that you're thinking bigger? I mean, if you have someone that set their GCI, like, maybe it's okay that they set it at a certain number, but should they have had a second number, or how do you attack that if you hit your goals halfway through the year?
So I'm going to give you one word that changes everything. Or you say, I want to hit 150% or more by July or sooner. You see, that changes everything. It allows your brain to continue to stay clicked on when you say, I want 150% or more, or I want $4 million in GCI or more by September or sooner. It allows you the opportunity to expand beyond what you...
When do you expand? When you hit it?
Yeah, to expand beyond what you can do. It allows you to be bigger than what you thought you could be. And that's part of thinking without limits. A lot of times, just to, I love your faith tattoo. And so we're on the same page about that, right? Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And a lot of times it's not so much, the issue isn't getting the thing, it's about believing that we're worth that we can have the thing. And once we get it, it's very difficult for us to expand and think, I can have more. It can happen again. I can do something bigger. And so the way for us to expand our faith is to understand that more is always out there, because you could get a blessing, but if you're not prepared for the blessing, you're going to suffocate under it.
I saw a recent post by Russell Brand just today, and I haven't had enough time to digest this and dig and actually give my own thoughts on it, but I thought it was an interesting sentiment. It's the first time I ever heard this, but the opposite of faith, he was talking about the opposite of faith. Most people say is doubt, but he said the opposite of faith is actually certainty. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was pretty interesting, that it helps you attack what actual faith is more so than I think we really acknowledge. So I'm glad you brought that up.
So the question I always ask with that, I love what you just said. I think that's fantastic. I'm gonna have to think about that as well. The question I ask with that is, why don't you already have it?
Faith?
No. Whatever that thing is that you're exercising your faith to have. So let's say you say, and I'm totally gonna make this up for you, I want a 10,000 square foot home for myself, or a 10,000 square foot summer home. Well, the answer for you is, why don't you already have it? When you understand what your story is about why you don't have it, that will tell you everything about why you are where you are instead of where you want to be.
Let me ask you something. Let me take it a step further. Is it ever the case that you don't achieve said thing because you didn't actually want it that bad in the first place?
I think sometimes that's the case. We say what we want, but on the inside, we have a level of inner conflict. Dr. Patrick Gentempo said that we can only rise as high as our level of conflicts about things. So I'll give you a great example from my personal life. I'm just going to be very transparent. I have a 13-year-old at home, and this is my first foray into the audiobook and starting to promote this, because I told him this. I said, honestly, I've always felt like I had a very important message to share. And I love this. I absolutely love it. I love being on the road, speaking for large organizations and working with people. But I also like being at your track practice too. Mm. I love those epic car rides to school. I love being able to say for sure when we're going to talk, and that is always there. Like every game, every meet, every. I want that. And so I wanted two things that I felt were competing. And so for a while, honestly, I really wanted to be a great dad, and I really wanted to be a great businessman. And in my mind, there was a subconscious conflict. And so I went toward the side that gave me the most certainty. And I focused on being a dad. And I put off a lot of things. Couldn't figure out why I couldn't get something done. Couldn't figure out why I couldn't find any new ideas, any motivation. Now here I am helping other people, but I was stuck myself until I realized that inner conflict, and that created that friction. And so we have to ask ourselves, this is why why this whole conversation and the book and everything is so important, because I help us to deal with that friction that we have between what we say and what we do. And there's a reason why it doesn't align when it doesn't. When we can address it and then begin to create a different pattern in that, then we're able to break through that and get more of the things that we really want.
You mentioned the book again. I'm writing a book myself. I'm really interested in the writing space. You mind if I ask you a couple questions about just the whole thing? I mean, this is my first one, so I'm learning alongside everybody else.
I'm happy to help.
So you've written how many books? 18, did you say?
I wish. I've written 14 and an audiobook. The most recent one is the audiobook. 14
and an audiobook. All right. So as you're writing, let's just talk about the last one. So the last one, get off your butt and make it happen. If you're right, how many? So I'm going somewhere with this, so just bear with me. How many chapters is it?
This one is 8 chapters.
8 chapters. So when you go to write this book, do you start with an overarching theme of what it is that you want to communicate with like 2 or 3 points, and then you just work out and expand? Do you have like 8 chapters already in your head and you're like, this is the flow? Like, how do you attack a book?
So this is a very loaded question, because I'll say my process is a little bit different than most, but I've also coached people through writing their own book. So here's my answer for this. Most people think that books are written from page 1 to page 300. It ain't like that. It doesn't work that way, because you're going to be thinking about something, or for example, the Russell Brunson quote came up and you're really hot and heavy on that. There's a reason why your passion is there. So my advice to writers is follow the energy. The thing that you're most passionate about that day, even if it's not what you're scheduled to write about the thing that your heart is really into, because that's where the best details are going to come from. So when you lay out the book, the way I look at it is, so RW, you want to, let's say I'm writing a book on becoming a realtor.
Mhm.
I would say, okay, what are the steps to take you from doing nothing and knowing nothing to being a top producer? Well, first you need to network. You have to have the right mindset. You've got to, get these certifications. You got to blah, 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 blah. Okay.
So what do you do? You write this all down?
Yeah, I would just make some big buckets. Like I'm a big paper and pen kind of guy still. I just make some circles or big buckets. And then I'll just do a brain dump. And this is what I would say. These are some things I would just want you to know in general. And then I'll take those and I'll revisit them, and I'll add 3 things. Number 1, I'll add some steps. Okay. What are the steps to going from 0 to successful? 1, 2, 3, 4. Next, or some people will call them the sequences. Number 2, I'll add the science, and I'll say, why is this the way to do it? Because anytime you make a big claim, you want to back it up. What's the science behind it? Science doesn't always mean Pythagorean theorem. Science can also mean the social science. Notice I talk a lot about the brain, psychology. So I'm very big into making sure that what I say is backed by something that's provable. And then number 3, I'll add in my secrets. And that's what makes it my own. That's where it really connects. Where I'll tell you, this is what the book is going to say, but here's a secret to do this a little bit better, a little bit faster. This will work for me. And then number 4, add in the stories.
Yeah. So you do the stories last.
In reference to what I think about, and how I want to just add the notes to the chapter to fill it out. It's not like I'm going to follow that exact same pattern every single chapter, but I want to make sure that as I'm thinking, I open my folders in my brain up specifically at a certain time. What stories do I have about developing mindset? What stories do I have about believing and belief? And what was it like before? Here's a great story formula, by the way. It's very simple and anybody can use it. It's before, change, and then after. This is what my life was like before. This was the thing that changed me. And then this was my life afterward. That's how you build a successful story bridge that works every single time. You look at every movie, they use it. Every speech, they use it. It's very simple. It's just like the mess, the turn, and then success.
I love that. So if someone's reading, if I were to pick up this book, what's the one thing you hope people to, when they're done reading it, feel or do?
Get off their excuses, to get off their butt.
You think someone's going to read it through the lens of like one particular thing that they just can't get past, or do you think they're going to apply it to like their entire lifestyle? Like if someone's picking it up to read it, where do you think they're coming from?
So I'll tell you what the feedback has been thus far. This is what has been happening. People have said, there is a big move that I would like to make. I want to make a transition or a jump from one level to the next, whether it's professionally or personally. Sometimes it's really just about being more authentic and giving themselves permission to achieve on another level. What the book has done for people is it has given them the words that they need to release some of the weights that have been holding them, and has given them a new set of language to open themselves up to get ready to make that next big move. I believe that the majority of things that we want in life are so much easier when we just know what to say. If you want to talk to your kids, it's so much easier when you just know what to say. The thing that holds us back the majority of time is I don't want to get stuck. I don't want to put myself out there and then not know how to navigate. So I do a lot of conversation around languaging and asking yourselves the right questions and then saying the right affirmations so that you feel strong in that moment. Because in that moment, that's the thing that can change your life forever.
Yeah. Well, to wrap it up, we started talking about the running, and this is something that is somewhat newer in your life since COVID hit, and you got passionate about running, and now you've run 20 halves or fulls, right? So what have you learned in the process of running and getting, I mean, this is, you could write a whole book just on this alone. I know, because when I'm on a treadmill for 20 minutes, I feel like I could write a book from what I'm learning, just lying to myself, hey, just one more minute. And you get there and you're like, just kidding, buddy. It's another 10 minutes. Like, what have you learned through the process of running?
So that's the perfect question. It's actually a lot of what I deal with. The biggest lesson that I learned about running is that we have to be where our feet are. Running is very humbling because on your slowest day, there's somebody slower than you. But on your fastest day, there's also somebody faster than you.
Wow, yeah.
So it's really about being where your feet are. And the competition is not you against another person. And sometimes it's not even you against your time. It's really about you competing against who you would be if you stopped doubting that you could be that person. So we all have a thermostat. So I've run at my fastest, I think it was like 1 hour and 53 minutes for a half marathon, which was pretty good at the time. And then I started thinking, well, what about 150? What about 145? And all of a sudden there's a thermostat and I think, okay, I know I could do 153 because I've done it before. But 145, that sounds very difficult. 130 seems impossible. Not that other people aren't doing it. It just seems impossible for me. But what if I said, this is who I'm going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just read the book, 10X is easier than 2X. And the author said something I thought was so powerful, Dan Sullivan. He said that your identity is the story that you've hung on to the longest. It is the one that you're most committed to. That is your identity. And in order to change your results, you must first change your identity. That level of belief is so important because what you believe, you will ultimately become. So that goes back into everything we've been talking about for the whole time. It's not like it just happens. It's because of the belief that says, this is not just what I can do, but this is what I believe I deserve.
Yeah. Man, this is loaded. Some good stuff, Jonathan. Where can we find you for more inspiration and exciting, the way you think? I'm excited to read your book. Where can we find you?
Audible! Go to Audible and find that book. It's not a long one. It's about 4 hours total. So it's like a conversation. If you like this kind of thinking, you're going to really enjoy the book. I broke all the rules. I did everything that was the opposite of what you were quote unquote supposed to do in an audiobook.
You went off script?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
cool.
I mean, you can hear me banging on the table sometimes. I record it on different days. Some days my voice is kind of like raspy. It's not like one long conversation. It's its own kind of dialogue. Each chapter is its own topic and its own one-on-one coaching session. I have music in there. I have speech clips for my presentations, and I did everything that you'll never find in any other book because I wanted to make it personal, make it a conversation between you and me, not something that you just listen to me talk about my life for 4 hours.
This has been fantastic. Jonathan Sprinkles, if you are listening to this and you want to impact the show, email us at podcast@realproducersmag.com. Let us know who you want to hear from and what you want to hear about. We'll see you next time.